Welcome back to the EU Decoded podcast, and today we dive into European defence, a topic more urgent than ever. What actions are needed to secure our future?
Europe has to be capable to defend itself.
We cannot depend on anybody else.
We cannot secure European continent without European industries.
Security is a new European promise.
Many Europeans believed they could sleep peacefully because the global order was guaranteed by their American ally. But that time is over. Nicolás Pascual de la Parte, a leading EPP Group MEP on security and defence, says the global order is shifting and Europe must adapt, as it can no longer rely solely on American security guarantees.
The new administration and the new president of the United States have said that the US are perhaps not willing, able, and ready to continue supporting our security, and that it could perhaps in the future disengage from our common security. In any case, with or without the US, the European Union as such, we have to set up our own defense capabilities and to create a Europe of defense. We cannot depend on anybody else, and we have to defend ourselves, our way of life, our principles, our convictions, and we cannot, again, outsource our defense. We have been living off the dividends of the peace for the last 30 years, since the implosion of the Soviet Union in December 91. We thought that wars were not to be again back in the continent, and now we are facing a horrible war in Ukraine, which has waking us up, all of us, and has been a wake-up call to keep our future in our reins, in our hands, and to provide ourselves with the capabilities, with the financing and the political will to defend ourselves.
The EPP Group in the European Parliament is leading efforts to build a true common defence. The latest example is a European Defence Procurement Summit with the EU Defence Commissioner and leaders of flagship European companies. Here's Manfred, chairman of the EPP Group in the European Parliament.
European defense is one of the key historic challenges in this moment of time. And for us as EPP, politics starts with listening, with taking care about the industry sector, about those who are working every day in this area. That's why the common platform of the defense industry is the starting point for developing a good policy.
François-Xavier Bellamy, who's head of the French delegation in the EPP Group, outlines that past crises have shown just how vulnerable Europe can be.
Defense is not only about defense, and the security of our country involves to secure fundamental supply chains for our countries. When we speak about defense, we speak about armies. Of course, armed forces are protecting our countries. But behind the armed forces, it should be absolutely certain that we have the value chains to supply and to give to people on the ground the capacity to act and to operate. And this involves having secure value chains. We saw during the COVID crisis how vulnerable we were in front of a pandemic when we do not have a capacity to produce our own medication. We felt after the start of the war of aggression of Russia in Ukraine how vulnerable we were when we do not produce our own energy. In front of a war tomorrow we would be extremely vulnerable if we would not have the industrial basis in Europe to produce what our armed forces need to operate on the ground. And this is the reason why we cannot secure European continent without European industries. And it's the reason why it was so important for us to meet with leaders of European defense industry to build a common strategy on ramping up our industrial base in terms of defense in Europe.
To boost Europe's defence, the EU member states agreed to spend billions of euros as part of the rearmament initiative. Andrzej Halicki, vice chair of the EPP Group and the head of the Polish delegation, says that the EU can now focus on common big projects.
Program SAFE 150 miliardów euro.
Mr. Halicki outlines that the SAFE programme offers 150 billion euros in low-interest, accessible loans dedicated to the European defence industry. And he says that it enables the implementation of strategic projects such as the defence of the Eastern Flank, the Eastern Shield and the Baltic Line. And this initiative is further reinforced by the ReArm EU programme, which relies on national contributions that should reach a certain budgetary threshold. For example, Poland is committing 5% of its GDP.
To 5% PKB.
The Rearm Europe plan aims to mobilise more than €800 billion in defence spending by unlocking national fiscal flexibility. At the same time, the SAFE initiative introduces a new €150 billion loan instrument to support joint procurement across the EU. Here's Manfred Weber again.
Europe has to be capable to defend itself, and that's why we need now a lot of massive investments in the defense structure of Europe. And the first question is how to be more efficient. If we do procurement together as Europeans, if we buy our tanks together, it is more efficient. We will save millions and even billions of European taxpayers' money, and that is the idea behind the common procurement. Another element for this common procurement is that we are then more innovative. We have in this moment of time 16 different kinds of tanks in the European Union, and the Americans have one tank. You can imagine it's more efficient and it's also more innovative if you only develop one kind of tank.
Nicolás Pascual de la Parte, EPP Group MEP and former Spanish ambassador to NATO, outlines the path forward.
The only way we can be efficient and to be a kind of rules maker and not only rules taker and provider of security and not only consumer of security is that we go together, the 27 member states. No European state on its own is strong enough and large enough to defend itself. Everything we have to do is going together for joint procurement, for joint resources, for joint financing, and we have to follow up a kind of logical sequence. First of all, we have to identify clearly which are the joint threats and menaces we face, all of us. It's easier said than done because the feeling of a Polish perhaps does not coincide with the feeling of a Greek or with the Spanish, with the German, but we have to come to an agreement concerning the joint threats and menaces. Second step, to map out our vulnerabilities and our shortcomings. The third step is to create the capabilities, military and civilian capabilities, to fill the gaps that we have identified in the second phase. And the last one, the fourth one, last but not least, is to mobilize enough financing for that. And in this framework comes the 800,000 million euros of the Rearm Europe program. That's supposed to be in place until the end of 2028. The multi-annual financial framework. And we have not enough money because the previous pluriannual financial framework was approved before the invasion of Ukraine, and that's why we need additional money until the next one in 2028. That is the purpose of this initiative of the 100,000 euros.
A major change in the context of the rearmament of the European Union is the European Defence Industry Programme, EDIP, which has been adopted by the European Parliament. François-Xavier Bellamy says it's about setting an ambition.
EDIP is European Defence Industry Programme, and this programme is a major change in the context of the rearmament of the European Union and European countries for the defense of our continent. In fact, it's setting an ambition. We will invest common European money in developing new equipments, weapons and military supply that will be requested by the member states who are keeping the capacity to command and define the needs because the project is to equip as they should be the armed forces of our countries. Where the change lies is that it's European common budget and European common ambition. We want to invest in equipment that are built out of 70% at least of European components with European design authorities, so projects that will be shaped by European companies. And finally, to build products that are not protected under foreign licenses. So it's a huge ambition to regain our autonomy in terms of defense. Of course, in the framework of the alliances that are shaping Europe's security, but also with a very strong European approach to build an autonomous pillar of our own defense.
Manfred Weber says he's convinced that now is the time for other ambitious projects.
We have to invest the money in European defense in an efficient way. Let's do it together. But the second thing is, let's look for European flagship projects. For example, a European air defense system in the east of Europe would be of benefit for all of us. Or imagine a common cyber brigade for the European Union, where in the digital world there is no national border anymore. That's why do it together. Then it's more efficient and we are safer as Europeans. These kind of European flagship projects to develop a real strong pillar of European defense is the next step.
Mr. Halicki emphasises that security is a key concern for Europeans and that the EPP Group is responding to this need.
Europejczycy oczekują bezpieczeństwa.
Europeans expect security. That's the clear message we get from every question we ask our citizens. They want to feel safe, says Mr. Halicki. He stresses that that's why the EPP Group is responding to this need, and he believes that in the coming years, the EU will prove that Europe is fully capable of building and ensuring its own security for its people. And that's all for today's episode of EU Decoded. To stay up to date with the latest in EU politics, follow us on social media, visit the website at eppgroup.eu. Thanks for listening.